Hello and welcome. I'm Izzy at Minerva. Today we are looking at how to hack our very own Tracey Jacket sewing pattern. This is what it currently looks like, and we are going to transform it to look like this. How exciting is that? So basically there's quite a lot of subtle details in this alteration, and we do have a further mini series looking at loads of other different types of hacks you can do. So this just forms one part of a mini series to do with hacking the pattern. So the first thing we're going to do with this pattern is we are going to remove the top pockets. We're going to simplify the top down. We are then going to create, instead of creating an add-on pocket onto the front with like a really clear pocket definition shape, we're actually going to integrate the lower pocket so that it almost looks like it's hidden, and we're going to integrate it into the bottom half of the bodice. Really exciting. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add just a little bit of detail to the sleeve, a nice little subtle element of design into that area, because everything else has sort of simplified itself down. So we're just going to add a little bit of drama with a pleated sleeve. I'm really excited to show you all these little hacks today and how to draft them using the Tracey Jacket sewing pattern. So as you follow along today, you're going to need standard sort of pattern drafting tools and obviously the Tracey Jacket sewing pattern, which is available to purchase on our website. Now in today's video, I'm just going to talk you through how to make the alterations to the pattern, and then I'm going to show you and demo any bits that alter from the original pattern instructions, which are listed in this book. So that's all we're going to do today, and then I'm going to show you the end result so you can take a look and see what you think at home. Now, as always with our Minerva Exclusive sewing patterns, our patterns come along with 3 supporting videos. One is a sew along on our YouTube channel. We have a fabric focus, which talks about all the great fabrics that would work really well for the Tracey Jacket. And then we have a pattern fitting video as well, which talks about how to refine the fit of the jacket should you need to. So don't forget that those resources are available for you on our YouTube channel. Okay, brilliant. Let's get straight on into pattern drafting. Okay, so we have got 2 sleeve pattern pieces, K and L. I've cut out my size, so they're all ready to go. For the sake of this particular version, I'm not going to make any changes to this pattern piece. I'm just going to alter the top sleeve, just to keep it nice and simple. To start off with, just draw a nice straight line which runs perpendicular to the grain line. Then draw a line which runs from the top notch up here all the way down to the bottom, which is parallel to the grain line, and that's why I've drawn this little line here, so it's a nice little helping guide for us. Excellent. So this location down here is actually where we want the pleat to be. Annotate the seam allowance at the top of the pattern, and that's 1.5 centimeters from the top of the pattern piece. Next, grab your scissors and cut along that line all the way up to the seam allowance up at the top, leaving a pivot point when you get up to the top. Then snip down just to leave a tiny little pivot at that point there. Now I want my pleat to be 5 centimeters wide in total. So all I'm going to do is swing out, pivoting up here, this side, so that it just extends out by 5 centimeters at the bottom. Add a strip of paper underneath your pattern piece to fill in that gap. And then just join up the bottom down here nicely and neatly. Now what we need to do is just to annotate the pleat lines, and I'm going to extend up a little line 3 centimeters up on that side and 3 centimeters up from the hemline at that point too. Now that's just going to give me a really nice little stitch line to follow when I come to sew that. So I might just put pleat here. Okay, and really that's all it is. We've added a bit of extra volume which we can then sew together and to create a nice elegant little pleat on the sleeve, and that's just widen the sleeve slightly to give us a bit more of a kind of exaggerated bigger sleeve. And obviously when we come to bring the cuff into action, once we've sewn the whole of the sleeve up together, this extra volume will be removed because we'll have sewn it together so it will fit onto the cuff beautifully. Okay. Nice and simple, but a really gorgeous little detail. You could obviously add 2 pleats or 3 pleats, or whatever. You could extend the pleat line up so the details kind of further up the sleeve and a bit more exaggerated at this point here rather than down at the cuff. Completely up to you. Okay, so we've done that bit now. Let's move on to the next hack, which is all about the pockets at the front. grab your front body pattern piece. This is the one we're going to be working on next. Line up your ruler with the centre front and draw a line straight across the pattern at the top of the pocket. Cut along that line. Separate those two pattern pieces so we've got a top and then a bottom. Now when we join these two pieces together, we need to add a seam allowance to both pattern pieces so that they can then be stitched back together again. Pop a little piece of paper underneath the two pattern pieces and then just draw in your seam allowance. Wonderful, so there we go. Now we've got our seam allowances sorted. The top pattern piece, we're now basically finished with that. The only thing that I should mention is we are removing the pocket piece here, so we don't need to mark that pattern piece onto our fabric. Okay, now let's take a look at the bottom part of the pattern piece because we're going to create that integrated pocket. Going to be really cute. Now the original pocket line went from this dot here up to this one here. Hard to see that one now because I sort of cut along it, but that's where it was right there. What I want to do, and obviously if I drew a pocket that continued all the way down there, it would potentially not hold very much because the pocket slit would go all the way down. So I'm actually just going to angle my pocket a little bit deeper, so it's a bit more of an exaggerated angle, a bit like this, but I'm going to keep that point there. So you just find a point that you're happy with. I'd say it's probably about 5 centimeters above the hip line at that point, and just draw that onto your pattern. Next, we're going to grab a piece of tracing paper and pop it on top to duplicate that pattern and create our outer pocket piece. Okay, once you've got your tracing paper overlaid over the first piece, we're basically just going to trace around the entire piece except for this line here. So this is exactly how we're going to be sewing it together. The underneath piece, the white piece of paper, is going to be like our base layer, and then we're going to put another second piece of fabric on top of it and basically sew them together with a nice little gap here for our pocket. So if this is where we want our pocket line to stop, like to finish aesthetically, visually, when we're wearing it, we need to add a seam allowance onto this so that we can tuck it under and then sew it all together. What I'm actually going to suggest is that we add a 3 centimeter seam allowance so we can just have a really nice deep infill at that point. So just dash out the fold line so you've got it and you understand where that is. Next, take your tracing paper and literally fold along that folded line. Then draw a line that's parallel to the fold line at 3 centimeters offset. And actually down here, trace along that line there, because effectively that's what's going to happen when we sew it together. It's going to be folded back on itself and we want the side seam to match up. Up here, we can do exactly the same. Follow that stitch line there. Okay, and then fold it back out. And basically, that's the shape that you want to create. It does look a bit weird, I do understand that, but in theory, it's going to work absolutely beautifully. So that is our pocket piece. So all we need to do now is just annotate the pattern piece as usual. This is the grain line. Now this pattern piece is going to be the front outer pocket. I'm going to cut 2. One for the right side and one for the left side. Let's add our little notches. We've got the one over there. That's it. That's done. On this one, I think we should relabel this one and call it the front inner pocket. And again, cut 2. Okay, cut out that new front outer pocket piece and then you are done. So at this point we've done everything we need to do in terms of pattern drafting and we're just going to get straight on into the sewing bit. Now, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm only going to demo the steps which are different to the original pattern instructions. So that will obviously be the lower pocket pattern piece and how that all fits together to create that integrated pocket. And also it's going to be the sleeve pattern piece as well with the little pleat. So let's get straight on into that and take a look and see what it looks like at the end of the video. The fabric that we've chosen to sew this particular hack in is this Minerva Core Range brushed cotton fabric in Royal Stuart print. So it's really nice and soft. It's got a really lovely light weight to it as well, medium to lightweight, and it's going to be really fun to sew together. So to start off with, we'll follow the first few instructions and do all the prep that we need to, interfacing and stay stitching. Ignore all the steps about the pockets because we're going to be doing our pockets separately. So So let's take a look at how we're going to sew our integrated pockets into the front of our top. Okay, we're going to look at these two pieces first, the front outer pocket and the front inner pocket. The first thing we're going to do is to prep the outer pocket by prepping and finishing off this facing to the pocket here. So to start off with, I have already interfaced the underside up to the fold line there, so you can grab a piece of interfacing and do the same if you want to. I'm then going to fold it back just by 7mm and press in place. Once you've folded it over by 7mm, then fold it again along the original fold line at that point. So pin your facing in place, and what we want to do next is we want to run a line of top stitching that just catches the fold really nicely and neatly onto the main body of the garment. So that's about 2cm offset from the folded edge, but you take a measurement and double check that. Just make sure your first line of stitching is catching the folded facing. Great, and once you've done one line, just do a second line 6mm away from the first line. Okay, just like that, that's looking really gorgeous. Okay, so now with right side up, get your under pocket, which is this one, and it's so simple. All we're going to do is put one on top of the other, just like that, and then pin together all the way around the sides. We're just going to now sew a line of basting stitches all the way around from the edge of the pocket here at the top all the way around to the edge of the pocket here, and what that's going to do is it's going to leave us with a really nice deep pocket on the inside. Great, okay, so that's done now. We have got a lovely little pocket. It's more than a lovely little pocket, it's a lovely, great and big and deep pocket. It's going to look stunning. Okay, repeat that whole process for the other pocket. Okay, great. Now we've got the pocket piece down here, which we've just sewn together. And then we've got the top of our jacket here. So with right sides together, lay one over the other, pin that seam together, and then sew using your standard seam allowance. Okay, and once you've sewn that together, I've just finished it on the inside, I've pressed it down, and then I'm going to run a line of top stitching just to hold that seam allowance down. I may actually run 2 lines of top stitching just to match up with what we did on the pocket here. Once you've done one pocket, obviously repeat the same for the other side. And basically now we've got up to step 9 and we've basically sewn the pockets, but just in a different way. So then sew step 10 all the way through to the sleeves, and then at that point join me at the sleeves and we'll come back and sew the sleeves together. Okay, next we're going to move on to our 2 sleeve pattern pieces, and we're going to look at front sleeve K first. Now, down at the bottom, down here, we've got 2 little notches where our pleat line is. So open up your pattern pieces and put right sides together and line up those little pleat notches. Pin in place where the pleat line is, and don't forget that it's on a slight diagonal. So the pleat, remember we opened it out, so the pleat lines are not running perpendicular to the base, they are at a slight angle and slightly in. So just make sure when you pin it that you're following the line of that pleat, and just do the same then for the other side. Make a note of how far up we're going to sew the pleat line. So I'm just going to put a pin in at the point of where the notch, where that is. And do the same for the other one too. Excellent. Okay, basically what we're going to do now is we're going to sew along that pleat up to the stop line. So basically from the bottom up to the top like that. Make sure you reinforce the top and the bottom of the stitch line so it's nice and strong as you sew it. Next, press those little pleats in place so that on the underside you've basically just squashed it in half and you've got half the pleat on either side. You could, just like this, you could push the pleat to one side or the other side, but I quite like to have it evenly distributed for this particular style. Okay, and that's it really. You're just going to follow the rest of the instructions exactly as they are in the book to sew the sleeve together, add the cuff and insert the whole sleeve into the garment. And then obviously attach your poppers or your buttons, whichever one you would prefer, exactly as it has in the instruction booklet. And then let's take a look and see what it looks like. Here it is, our Tracey hack, with a gorgeous pleated sleeves and an integrated pocket created by panels at the bottom of the garment. This creates a really sleek, clean look. I do hope that video has really inspired you to try playing around with your Tracey jacket pattern at home, and do obviously share any of your creations on our Minerva website. You can create a free account on our website and upload the pictures and tag the fabric and any patterns that you've used. It's always lovely to see what our Minerva maker community is sewing up at home, and it's great to share that with our online sewing community. So thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. I'll see you next time.